I was alone, lost in a forest I didn't know. No phone, no water, no way out. And then she appeared, a woman from a tribe most people never even knew existed. She didn't speak my language, I didn't speak hers, but what happened next changed both of our lives forever. If you've ever been saved by a stranger, or if you still believe that real human kindness exists in this world, stay until the end, because this story doesn't go where you think it will. And I promise you, by the time it's over, you'll feel something you haven't felt in a long time. Like and subscribe so stories like this one reach the people who need them most. I want to be honest with you about the kind of person I was before all of this happened. I was a wildlife photographer. Not famous, not particularly successful, but passionate. I had spent the better part of 8 years traveling through places most people only see on nature documentaries. I thought that made me someone who understood the wild. I thought that made me someone who understood people, too. I was wrong on both counts, and it took one very bad afternoon to show me that. It was supposed to be a routine assignment. A small conservation magazine had hired me to document a species of forest hornbill in a remote stretch of Central Africa, a region that sits between two countries, far from any major road, far from any town worth naming. I had a local guide with me for the first 2 days, but on the third morning, he received a message, a family emergency, and I told him to go. I told him I'd be fine. I had a compass, a rough map, and about 12 years of field work behind me. What could go wrong? Everything, it turns out. I left camp around 9 in the morning, chasing a sound I'd never heard before, something between a whistle and a drum beat deep in the canopy. I walked maybe 40 minutes in one direction before I realized I had been so focused on looking up that I had completely stopped paying attention to where I was going. The trail was gone, or rather, I was gone from it. When I turned around, every direction looked exactly the same. Green on green on green, stretching out in every direction with no end and no edge. I told myself to stay calm. I sat down on a root, drank some water from my bottle, and tried to use my compass, but the canopy was so thick that the reading kept shifting. I walked north for 20 minutes and ended up back at a river I hadn't seen before. I tried east, nothing. I tried to climb a tree to get a better view, and that's when I twisted my ankle on the way down. Not badly enough to stop walking, badly enough to know that every step from that point forward was going to cost me. By early afternoon, the forest had changed. The light dropped, the sound changed, and something very quiet started whispering in the back of my mind, something I hadn't heard in a long time. Fear. Not the sharp, sudden kind you get when something jumps out at you, the slow kind, the kind that creeps in and sits down next to you and waits. I'm not a dramatic person. I don't say this to make it sound more exciting than it was. I genuinely thought, sitting there with a sore ankle and a compass that wasn't making sense, that I might not make it out on my own. And then I heard something. Not the hornbill, not any animal I could name. It was a soft, deliberate sound, like someone placing a foot carefully on dry leaves and then deciding not to. I froze. I scanned the trees around me. Nothing. Stillness. And then the trees moved, and she stepped out. She was tall, wearing cloth wrapped around her in the way that is particular to deep forest communities, not decorative, functional. Her arms had markings on them, dark lines that ran in patterns from her wrists to her elbows. She carried a wide woven basket on her back, and in one hand a long stick she used less as a walking aid and more as something she touched to the ground to test it. She stopped about 10 feet away from me and looked at me, not with alarm, not with hostility, with curiosity. I didn't know what to do. My instinct was to raise my hands, not in surrender exactly, but in that universal gesture of I mean no harm. She looked at my hands, then she looked at my face, then she looked at my camera bag, and then, I'll never forget this, she tilted her head very slightly to one side, the way a person does when they've already figured something out and they're just waiting for you to catch up. She didn't say a word to me. She looked back the way she had come, and then she looked at me again, And then she turned and started walking. She didn't motion for me to follow. She didn't look back over her shoulder. She just walked, like the matter was already settled. And I followed her. I know how that sounds. A strange woman in the middle of a forest I don't recognize walks away, and I just go with her. But I want you to understand, there was something in the way she moved that was so completely without doubt, so completely certain that my fear simply stopped. Not because I was sure I was safe, but because something in my gut, somewhere deeper than logic, told me this is the only right thing to do. We walked for over an hour. Through dense undergrowth that she moved through without hesitation, across a narrow stream where she stepped on stones I wouldn't have noticed without her, up a rocky slope that she climbed with the kind of ease that told me she had made this exact journey hundreds of times before. My ankle was aching, my pack was heavy, and I was watching her and feeling something I didn't have a word for yet. She stopped several times along the way, never to rest. She didn't seem to need to. She stopped to look, to touch things. At one point, she crouched down beside a particular plant and broke off a single leaf, rolled it between her fingers, and held it out to me. I looked at it. She gestured toward my mouth. I hesitated. She made the gesture again, not impatiently, just clearly, so I chewed it. It was bitter, then cooling, and within a few minutes, the ache in my ankle had gone from a shout to a whisper. I don't know what that plant was. I never found out, but it worked. We developed a language between us in that hour. Not words, gestures, sounds, expressions. She would point and I would look. I would slow down and she would pause without making me feel like a burden. At one point, a large snake crossed our path, and she stopped me with a single press of her hand on my arm, calm, firm, and we waited until it had gone its own way. She knew this forest the way I know my own apartment, every corner, every sound, every shortcut. She glanced at my camera back again. I took it as an invitation. I took the camera out and showed her the small screen on the back, some of the photos I had taken that morning. Birds mostly, trees, light through leaves. She looked at the screen for a long moment, then pointed at a photo of a hornbill mid-flight, and her face did something I was not prepared for. It completely opened up. The most genuine, uncomplicated, delighted smile I had ever seen on another human being. Not because of the technology. I don't think she cared about the technology at all. She recognized the bird. That bird was part of her world, and I had somehow caught it. I want to tell you what I felt in that moment, because it's important. I felt embarrassed, not in a bad way, in a clarifying way. Here was a woman who knew this land down to its roots and its remedies, who could read the forest the way I read a road sign, who carried centuries of knowledge in her hands, and I had come here with my equipment and my experience, thinking I was the one who knew something. I didn't know anything. I had been taking pictures of a world I didn't understand, and she lived inside it. The village appeared without announcement. One moment there were trees, and then there was a clearing, and in the clearing there were circular huts with thatched roofs, and cooking fires, and children running, and elders sitting in the shade of a wide tree at the center of it all. It was not large, maybe 30 or 40 people in total, but it was alive in a way that's hard to explain if you've only ever lived in cities. Everything connected to everything else, nothing wasted, nobody idle in the way that modern people are idle. The village noticed me immediately. Of course they did, but the reaction was not what I expected. There was no alarm, no aggression. There was stillness, a collective pause like a breath held. And then the woman said something, several things, and the breath was released, and life continued around me, though many eyes stayed on me with quiet watchfulness. An elder came forward. He was old in the way that only people who have actually lived get old, not just in the lines on his face, but in the weight of his presence. The woman spoke to him for several minutes. He listened without interrupting. Then he nodded once and looked at me, and in that look I felt assessed. Not judged, assessed. There's a difference. Someone brought me water. Real water, clean and cold, in a clay vessel. Then food, something cooked with root vegetables that I couldn't name, but that was the best thing I had eaten in 3 days. And a place to sit, close to the fire where the light was good and the warmth reached my skin. Nobody demanded anything from me. Nobody made a show of welcoming me. They simply made space for me, the way you make space for someone who is obviously lost and obviously harmless. I sat there and I watched. I watched how they moved together, not like strangers sharing a space, but like a single organism that happened to have many bodies. I watched children be corrected, gently, by adults who were not their parents. I watched food divided without negotiation. I watched an old woman and a young man work together to repair the frame of a hut with the kind of easy, silent cooperation that takes years to build. And I thought, I have been traveling for 8 years, documenting wildlife, documenting the natural world, and I have walked right past this, right past people, right past the most interesting thing on earth. The next morning, the elder came to find me. He sat across from me at the fire, and he looked at me for a long time before he spoke. And then he spoke in French. Careful, slow French, the kind that a person learns from contact rather than a classroom. He told me the woman's name, the name her community used for her, which translated roughly as "she who walks between worlds." He said she had been given this name because she was the one who moved between the forest and the edges of the outside world, watching, learning, tracking what was coming. And then he told me what was coming. He described machines, big ones in the distance. He described men with papers who had come once before, who spoke to people in the nearest town, not to them, and who had taken measurements of the land. He described trees being taken, slowly, farther and farther from where they used to be. He told me that they didn't know exactly what was coming or exactly when, but that they knew something was coming, a logging operation, one that would not stop at the edge of their forest. He said, "You have a camera. You can make the world see?" And something landed in my chest like a stone, because I realized, in one sudden, cold moment, that she had not saved me by accident. She had seen my equipment from wherever she had been watching me. She had recognized it. She had made a decision, not about me as a person, but about what I might be able to do. And she had led me here not just to get me out of the forest, but because she and the elder had been waiting for someone like me, someone with a camera, someone who could carry their story out of that clearing and into the world. But here is the part that I cannot shake, the part that I still think about years later. She had no way of knowing if I would actually help. She had no guarantee that I was honest or brave or anything other than someone with expensive equipment and a twisted ankle. She helped me anyway. She fed me. She gave me the leaf that stopped my pain. She opened her home, her community to me, and she asked for nothing in return before she did any of it. That is not a transaction. That is something else entirely. I stayed 2 more days. I asked through the elder for permission before I photographed anything. They talked among themselves and came back with a decision. Yes, but only what they showed me. I agreed, and what they showed me was extraordinary. Not just the community, but the forest itself, the way it looked when you really knew it, when you moved through it with someone who belonged to it. It looked completely different, fuller, more alive. I left carrying several rolls of photographs and something heavier, a responsibility I hadn't asked for but couldn't put down. Back in the city, I contacted an environmental law organization that worked on land rights in the region. I sent the photographs and the story, everything the elder had told me, everything I had seen. A week later, I reached out to a major conservation publication. They ran the story. The photographs ran with it. The combination of the images and the legal pressure created enough noise that the logging project was flagged for a land rights review. It didn't stop overnight. These things never do. But it stalled. It slowed. It was seen. I want to be careful here because I am not the hero of this story. I carried something out of the forest that was handed to me. The courage that built that story, the years of watching, the decision to trust a stranger, the patience of an elder who waited for the right moment, None of that was mine. I was just the messenger. But sometimes the messenger is the thing that was missing. I tried to find a way to go back. I left a message with a contact near the forest who sometimes passed through the area. And then I waited. Months passed, and I wondered if I would ever know what had happened to them, to her, to the village at the edge of the world. A year later, a letter arrived. It came in a plain envelope, addressed in careful handwriting. Inside was a single page written in French by the elder. He told me the land rights review had resulted in a protected boundary being drawn around their territory. The logging machines had not come. The forest, for now, was intact. And then there was one more thing in the envelope. A bracelet, small and woven, made from the same kind of fiber as the basket she had carried that day. And underneath it, 3 words in the elder's handwriting. She remembers you. I sat with that for a long time. I thought I would feel proud. I thought I would feel like I had done something good and important. Instead, I felt small, in the very best way that a person can feel small. The way you feel when you realize the world is far larger and more intricate and full of grace than you previously believed. The kind of small that makes you want to be better. She walked into my fear without being asked. She shared what she had: knowledge, food, fire, trust, without knowing what she would get back. And she did it first, before she knew anything about me. I carry that bracelet with me, not as a souvenir, as a question I keep asking myself. What did I do today that I didn't have to do? Whose path did I cross that I could have helped? Did I help first, or did I wait until I was sure it was worth it? I went into that forest to find something worth photographing. I came out understanding that the most important things don't fit in a frame. If this story moved you even a little, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Not for the views, not for the numbers, but because stories like this one are disappearing. The people in them, the people who still walk between worlds, who still help strangers in forests, who still trust without proof, they are disappearing too. The least we can do is remember them, and maybe, just maybe, carry a little bit of what they knew. Drop a comment below. Tell me, what is the most unexpected act of kindness a stranger has ever shown you? I read every single one, and I'll see you in the next story.